Welcome back, everyone. We took a summer vacation. Not that any of us needed it. We got a little bit busy in the summer with Saul and John. They're going through. They're still paving the way for us. So glad that they're back. Saul, how's the world in San Diego?
It's humid, but like everything, I think inventory's down. Maybe up a little bit, actually. Market time's up. It's like it's summer. Everybody's on vacation.
Crazy, man.
Yeah.
Crazy. John, how about you, man? How's everything in Hawaii?
Nothing changes. It's just the same temperature. It's wonderful and beautiful. And, I've had my own little vacation over the hiatus right here. So now it's time to get back to work.
Now it's time to get back to business. Where do we start where the real estate world is heading? Should we go with the all-encompassing threat of all-in-one with ICE, Rocket, and Zillow? Or do we start with litigations? Or do we start with the surprise that commission for buyers is up? Where do we start?
Well, that's a good place to start. That's our positive thing,
Let's go. So where do we start with commissions for buyers agents are up? And this time, I thought I was guilty of thinking, well, is our commission or the commission, is that going to go down over the next few years? I thought that, but that didn't happen.
Well, so what made us think that? And the answer is the litigation, the Sitzer case, the fact that the offer of compensation was taken out of the MLS. The fact that part of the requirement under the settlement was that you had to have a written agreement with a buyer. And what we were hearing, Tristan and John, was that agents weren't going to know how to do this. They weren't going to have the courage to ask for, right? So we thought, well, if you don't ask, then you're not going to get anything. And then we also thought, well, people, they don't want to ask because then what if the buyer can't get it included in the contract, but what if the seller counters and says, I'm not paying? And so these were legitimate, I think, doubts that everybody had that, the industry, brokers and agents, they're not used to asking for commission on the buy side. And because they're not used to it, they might not know how to do it. They might underestimate their value. And then we read this article in the Wall Street Journal that says, contrary to popular belief, that all of this litigation would drive the buyer-broker commission down, just the opposite. Now, it didn't move it up too much, but from where I'm sitting, any increase is a benefit to the industry and shows the value that real estate professionals bring to the table, and that buyers don't want to do this necessarily on their own.
I think you used the right phrase there, value. Brokers suddenly saw that they needed to demonstrate the value proposition that they give to the buyer. And they had also this emphasis about the negotiation strength of the buyer. Now that the first step often now is that it's the transaction that's generated by the buyer making the offer. It's not generated necessarily by the listing. So I think that the agents are now working much more closely with their buyers to show them the kind of negotiation skills that they can have and the power they now have in the transaction.
Yeah.
Good point, guys.
Yeah, and I just saw a comment. The DOJ doesn't require that a buyer have an agent. There's no such requirement by the Department of Justice. Now, there was the settlement and that doesn't even require. All it says is that if you're going to be an agent, you're going to take a buyer out and show them properties, you've got to get this compensation thing figured out ahead of time.
Yep.
Right. And that's the doubt we had, that people would be able to figure it out ahead of time, have the courage to ask for it ahead of time, And the latest stats are in from the Wall Street Journal that said the cost of the transaction haven't gone down because of this settlement.
Yeah, I put up the link to the Redfin one with the Redfin data. That's similar, so that it's in that link there. And let us know what city and state or country you're from. What's up, Jerry? I see you from Alaska. Saul's San Diego. John's Hawaii. I am Ventura County, Thousand Oaks area, just so you know. That's why I say Malibu. Nobody knows where Thousand Oaks is unless you're from SoCal. So Malibu. Now, let's pivot into, by the way, that was a surprise to me, a good surprise. Let's pivot into something that both of you sent me. I'm going to share my screen really quick because I would rather read this.
Hey, I just saw Summer made a comment, and Summer, thanks for your help. Summer is a compliance officer and author, Summer Gorlick, and thanks for the help, Summer.
Thanks, Summer. We appreciate you. All right. San Diego MLS Executive Litigation Summary. What do we got here? Saul, John.
I just was playing around and came up with a list of different cases because there are so many cases, and John Riley and I were talking about this earlier. It's hard to even begin to keep track of it.
Yeah.
So we just kind of went back and started listing these different cases that we see, and we can just kind of go through them. The first one, the top of the list, it's got a long history. This is the National Association of Realtors and the Department of Justice. It goes back to pre-2008, and after the settlement with NAR back in 2008 expired in 2018. The DOJ jumped in. NAR and the DOJ came to an agreement. The DOJ backed out of the agreement, right? You remember that conversation?
Oh, yeah.
This case is still kind of out there. And so it's not to be forgotten, although we would like to.
Well, I think one thing relevant to that is the NAR took it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court basically, to end all of these appeals that have been going on for 3 or 4 years, they basically said, no, they're not going to interfere with the Court of Appeals decision. And therefore, the case is still open. And therefore, those civil investigation demands, those CIDs, the demands of information, inside information from NAR are now going to be open and the hot topic of discussion. So that case is still now open after taking it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was a big case, lots going on, kind of seems to have settled down, but there's no telling with the matter of fact, the DOJ, what was the name of the fellow that the DOJ brought in, John, then they let him go?
Yeah, Roger Alford.
I didn't know they let him go.
Who was the lead? He was a counsel in the Sitzer case. So he was coming in, but he didn't last but a few months for the Department of Justice.
Yeah, big antitrust guy. Here's the thing about antitrust is because it seems like it's just like coming out of the woodwork, but it always has been. Whenever competitors come together and cooperate, they become a target for antitrust. And so that's why for years we were deathly afraid of talking about commissions, remember those days? Yeah. Mentioning commissions, because
all the time.
Yeah, you bring competitors together and you have them talking about anything. If they're cooperating, that's a target for the DOJ. So we got a lot of this. The Gibson case, that's another one. That's like the other side of the Sitzer case. Took the Sitzer case national. Lots of potential damages there, but part of it could be covered by the Sitzer NAR settlement, but it's just something else to keep your eye on.
The total funds accumulated already for the settlement is now exceeding $1 billion. And there were 2.5 million claims that were filed by sellers. So what that probably comes down to is a per person amount of it's $250, $300 for the sellers in that case.
That's crazy.
And the attorneys got 1/3, or will get 1/3 of the total amount in the funds. That's crazy too.
That's the craziest thing of all. But we all know why the lawsuit happened, right? It's just they saw it as an opportunity to make a shit ton of money, and they did. That's what it came down to. All right, what else? Can you guys explain to me a little bit further on the Gibson settlement sets precedent? What are we looking at that could be a big challenge for our industry when it comes to the Gibson settlement? What should we be paying attention to?
Well, the Gibsons did nationwide. The Sitzer case was kind of rooted in Missouri. And, the attorney Ketchmark was having the trial in Missouri. But simultaneously, to the Sitzer case, they also filed the Gibson case, which had a national footprint to it. So that's the real big difference, the application nationwide.
When you think about it, the Sitzer case was Missouri, and the damages were calculated on supposedly overpayment by sellers on properties in Missouri. What if you applied that to Malibu?
Yeah, we'll be in trouble.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, right? It's like that case was 1.8 billion, treble damages around 5 billion. There's a lot more room for damages on the Sitzer side, but again, it's kind of in my mind convoluted, or on the Gibson side, kind of convoluted with Sitzer, and but filed by the same attorneys and collecting a lot of money. Compliance becomes very important, I think, if you're an MLS or if you're a broker. And if you're covered by a settlement, be it NAR settlement or otherwise, you want to make sure that you remain in compliance.
Exactly. But, relevant to that is the fact that carved out of the $418 million NAR settlement were larger brokerages, the brokerages that had revenues over $2 billion a year. That group had to have separate settlements, and they did that individually. And one of the last big ones to settle is Howard Hanna Realty.
Yeah, I was reading that.
Yeah, were the last ones to settle. EXP and others that settled earlier, but that's why the fund has now gotten over $1 billion, dollars. But that created some real hard feelings between the larger brokerages and NAR, saying, "Hey, why didn't you protect us?" And I think NAR said, "Hey, we did the best we could with what we had to work with the DOJ, but having a settlement applying to realtors with not making working for companies making less than $2 billion a year was an NAR they feel was the best they could do."
Well, so another case that kind of move away from the residential is the algorithmic, what's contained in a database and data sharing. And John and I were real familiar with this. We worked for a major property management software company. We sold 2 companies to a big software development company. And this particular case is against a company called RealPage, which is a publicly traded software company, property management software. And John, you can talk to the details, but it is kind of interesting that contained in that database are what properties are renting for. And so what if you could feed back to landlords what properties like theirs are renting for? You could start to really affect the market, the rental market. And I think that's the main thrust of that case, huh, John?
Yeah, and it's going to be the major price fixing case. It's all about price fixing, where you had a conspiracy of some of the major landlords who were kind of exchanging confidential data that they had as to the rental rates. And this is a major case for the Department of Justice. And actually, it's one of the reasons why I think during the Sitzer case, the Department of Justice wasn't that responsive and active on Sitzer, because they were all involved with the investigation of RealPage. So in my book, this is a pretty major case, and it'll give us some good lessons as to the DOJ's attitude about steering and conspiracy and price fixing. So we're going to follow this one closely,
dude. And data sharing, like the limitations of with AI, like what limitations should we have? What is it? What is okay? What is not? That could be really interesting. You're right, John. I didn't think about that aspect of it. That makes a lot of sense. Now, let's go into my favorite one. Number 4. Rising MLS competition and governance challenges. We got the POS, NAR, Compass, Zillow, and everybody else seems to have some say in this. Where are we at with this?
Well, so let's break this down into a number of individual cases, right? You know, the first one is, and it's not the first only, that's the first one that came to my mind, is Northwest MLS and Compass.
Yeah.
So you've got this litigation going on with a big MLS, dominant player in their market, and Compass that wants to withhold listings from the MLS for their reasons. And of course, there's litigation there, and that, I think, is going to discovery. So that one is live and well. That's a case. Now, they have another Compass case. It's Compass and Zillow. Yep. Right? You got the titans of the industry kind of fighting with one another.
Well, hold on. Let's not get too excited. Zillow is a titan there, okay? It's like Zillow and CoStar, yeah, but Zillow and Compass.
Well, that's a whole nother one, right? Zillow and CoStar. So Zillow and Compass, because Zillow said, if you don't put your listing in the MLS, kind of a CCP thing, right? If you don't put your listing in the MLS, then you're not going to, for the life of the listing, we're not going to allow it on Zillow, which is contrary to Compass's whole move. So that's another conflict.
Yeah.
Right? Another big one. And then, of course, CoStar and they it's kind of interesting because, and this is interesting to me because copyright of images is a big deal.
It is a big deal, especially you leading the MLS, right? And your background. That's big.
Yeah. So you've got Compass saying, hey, we got rights to those images. And now if you're displaying those images and we've got the rights to it, and this is they're estimating $1 billion damage kind of situation where you have CoStar and Zillow going at it, right? And it reminds me of a case we had a number of years ago with Getty Images. A lot of people are familiar with Getty Images. Well, realtors and people, real estate professionals, you really need to pay attention to copyright around images.
Yeah. And
who owns the rights to the image. And so I was CEO of Point Two at the time. This was probably 2009, 2010. And realtors were taking pictures off the internet and loading them up on our website. And so we started to get cease and desist and notices from Getty Images, the company that owned the rights to these images. And they were like $1,000 a piece, right? And we're starting to get lots of these notices. NAR actually stepped in and settled that case, but it drove home to me the importance of understanding copyright, images, who owns it. Take your own pictures. If you're hiring a photographer, make sure you understand and the photographer understands who owns the rights to those images, because there could be a challenge. It could cost you money at some point down the line.
You know, the CoStar case involving this copyright infringement of images revolves around the rental sites. They have apartment.com. And they have arrangements with other entities, Redfin, I think, to supply images of apartments. And CoStar has spent millions of dollars. They're claiming that something like 46,000 images that they have claimed. And basically, their allegation is that not only did they take the image, but in the process, what they did was they took the image and then they cropped the image. They cropped out of the image the logos as to the copyright owner, so that the appearance is that they're really their own listings when they were watermarked, to be co-stars, and then they crop that out. It's going to be interesting how that case evolves.
Well, I mean, on that note, remember they bought
DHT,
that company that does the 3D
Matterport.
They bought Matterport, and then the last conversation that they're having as to how they're going to expand that is that they can have the Matterport photographers that go out and do this. They can extract those high HD images from Matterport and use those as primary images so that agents don't have to hire a photographer. Now who owns the images, right? At that point, John, right? The great question you brought up. Well, in that case, if I'm relying on CoStar to do it, CoStar owns everything, right? Because that photographer who went out there works for CoStar, and now what? So that could be a bigger problem in the future.
Well, you know how my contract law professor would answer that question that you had there. You said, well, who would do it? And his response was always, who knows? You don't know until what kind of lawyers you have, what kind of pleadings they make, what kind of judge you have. So you're up in the, well, who knows? But I think the MLSs are clear about their rules have to be very precise as to ownership and use of it. So they're part of analyzing the solutions.
That's true. All right, I have a question. I'm going to spring this one up, but you guys have a lot of knowledge. This is my personal question. This right here, because I was just reading this earlier today. It says, Secretary Bassett says Trump may declare a national housing emergency. And to me, after I read it, here's my question. What happens if they declare a national housing emergency, which hasn't happened since 2008, right? What does that allow the government to do, John? What am I missing? Because I don't understand why they would. Does it allow them to move much faster to do something different, like to take hold of where the Fed goes with the rates, or what? I don't understand.
Well, what I do with that is to hand it over to the real political expert in the group.
Oh,
my business partner for 30 years, Saul Klein. You can handle any kind of Trump questions for me, okay?
Trump.
Yeah. I just think it's kind of a general question. When there is an emergency of any kind, the government can step in. And what did we call it, John, when there was a moratorium on your payments on your mortgage? Remember that during COVID? And while you've been forgiven the loan, what was that called? The loan payment was delayed. So there's
forbearance.
Forbearance, right? Yeah. So there's that kind of an issue. So whenever there is an emergency, the government can waive certain requirements and regulations, and they could even come up with new programs. Now, I too believe that there's a housing crisis. There's no doubt about it. It's major. And I was talking to somebody the other day when I was a kid, when I was 15, my dad and mom bought a house in San Diego, and they paid $20,000 for a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage house. My mother did not work. My father worked. He was kind of a blue collar, not a high ranking naval officer, but a lower ranking naval officer. they were able to buy a house, $20,000, FHA loan, little money down. Again, one person working.
Yeah.
And today, there's just no way that could happen. So what's happened is that the value of properties accelerated dramatically, and salaries haven't kept up. And there's no doubt about that. So what are some of the things that could be done? There is a housing emergency, a housing crisis. And that's one of the reasons, Tristan, I think there's an opportunity in this idea of one stop, go in, one party, real estate, loan on the property. You know, the idea that we see with Redfin and Mr. Cooper and what was the other one they bought, John? This, right? ICE is involved, trying to do the same thing. Zillow's trying to, and what they're saying is they're going to take costs out of the transaction. And we need to take costs out of the transaction. I don't think that's enough, though.
Well, you bring up a good point. First, I was thinking as both of you were talking, when it comes to the national emergency, I thought, well, there is a lot of red tape in building, right? And that causes a lot more in costs. So maybe that's the route they're going, right? You were bringing it up. It's unaffordable. The other piece to this is it's become exceedingly even more unaffordable because through the last 40 years, all of a sudden, real estate became an investment to investors, and then they started trading with it. That changed the idea of what it was versus what it is now. Like, it is a true investment to companies. So that drives the value to places we never imagined, right?
Well, yeah. So you're absolutely. Although I got into real estate in 1975 because I wanted to invest in it.
Yeah. But I mean, look, you and I are like, we'll buy a few here or there, but we're talking about private equity bundles.
So here's something else that I think is a piece of this. And that is one of the reasons that property is not affordable is the biggest component of the cost of a property is the land. And so if, in fact, you could utilize the land more effectively, and that's why you see movement towards higher density. Because if you have higher density, you're spreading that land cost. You're doing a number of other things, but you're spreading the land cost out. More units, the land cost per unit goes down, and that could have something to do with affordability. So if the government came in and they said, here, new regulations, this was zoned for single family, but now you're going to be able to put 40 units on this lot.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Make a difference.
It does. It does. Deregulation. Interesting.
But then locally, they run into not in my backyard groups.
All day long, dude.
Well, all day long.
No, that can happen where you're at, but here, no, I don't think so. Right? That's what
the NIMBYs and the YIMBYs. Because so you now got this whole group of people that's yes in my backyard. Because if we're going to solve this issue, we got to, and the part of this is generational. So in some of the areas that in San Diego that I'm familiar with, you do have higher density. And you have walkability is something that people are interested in. Now, I would prefer to drive to most places, but a lot of people like to walk. And so they want to live close to where there's entertainment, where there's shopping, where there are grocery stores. And so you also see density bonuses in areas where they're close to transportation lines. Right? So there's a lot of things the government could get involved. I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm just saying there are a lot of things that the government could do to affect affordability.
Oh, let's keep an eye on that, guys. I like that. Well, look, I like where we're at. This is a good place to end. I love that we all caught up. Thank you. I'm sure things are going to get crazier with Zillow and Compass and CoStar and all of the little lawsuits that could grow into something big. So I'm glad that we're paying attention to those things and helping out people. Anything that's on your radar for this September that we should be paying attention to?
You know, for me, I like to watch what's happening with these little cases that have to do with tying, illegal tying? Do you have to be a member of the realtor organization to have access to the MLS? Those are things to watch, I think.
That makes sense. How about you, John? Anything that you're watching that it's got you interested more than usual?
Well, to me, it's a broader one. I'm interested in the role that brokers, local attorneys, are going to have in advising the brokers. Because one of the things we see under attack when we talk about antitrust matters is the conspiracy to write forms, that when the forms are written and they're done by committees of the competitors themselves. And so I think some brokers are going to be looking at developing their own forms that are consistent and compliant with the state law, but they're specifically written by the company's attorneys. This would apply to like the listing form and the buyer broker agreement. It would not apply to the purchase agreement.
Okay, so I have a question, then we'll end it because I have more questions. Guys, I feel like these sessions are for me, by the way. Thank you. All right. If I was going to start a brand new brokerage, okay, and knowing that we live in a world now that is way more litigation than I ever imagined in my entire life in real estate, this is crazy. What would be if I would get advice from both of you, like, Tristan, you should pay attention to this. John, what do you think I should worry about when it comes to opening up a new brokerage? What would be your worry?
That you're actually supervising the activity of the agents and not letting them run free on their own. And even though you're basically are signing the agreements as the broker, I would encourage you to actually very carefully supervise the activities of your agents.
I like that. That's very good. So put someone in place if you're not able to do it. Somebody that's competent, right?
Yes.
I like that. Saul, what about you? Because you are almost like a broker to 15,000 agents. What would you tell me?
Yeah, I think John hit on this from a broker's perspective. It's supervision, no doubt about it. And then I would make sure that my errors and omission insurance is up to date and covers my practice adequately.
That's a good one. I wrote both of them down, guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, one more for you, Tristan. You might consider going to law school.
I already tried that, John. I didn't make it. I got out.
Okay.
It was a summer class and I needed to take contracts. And I was like, do I really want to do this? And I'm like, I don't want to do this.
You got it. Okay.
So thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. Appreciate you. Thanks.
Okay.
Very good.
Thanks.